attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more, people. This is 9/11 Freefall. Hello, everybody. I'm Bernie Suarez, and I'm here with Andrew Steele, and we're coming to you on the internet and around the world via NoLiesRadio.org. We're also available on 911freefall.com. Where you can tune in to all of our previous shows. Hi, everybody. Again, welcome to 9/11 Freefall. This radio show, I want to remind our audience, is committed to the 9/11 truth. That's right. We are committed to the scientific evidence surrounding the events of September 11th, and we are committed to exposing the official story narrative of September 11th, and we are definitely committed to bringing attention to organizations that focus on the facts and the science of 9/11. That's primarily organizations such as architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. This is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the pursuit of academic truth with respect to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers on September 11th. Hey, Andy, how are you today? I'm excited to be here today. We've got a great guest. How are you doing today?
Well, you know, Bernie, my answer never changes. I'm always psyched to do these shows, and I'm really psyched about our guest this week. Talking to him before the show and preparing for this. This is a guy who really knows his stuff, and he's going to be helping us debunk or continue our series of debunking the mainstream, well, quote-unquote mainstream media. I kind of think of us as the mainstream media now, but, and we're going to be playing a clip from the History Channel that he is going to thoroughly just execute. And I just want to make this comment. I always like to make these comments in the opening of the show. I noticed this about the History Channel when they put out this piece attacking 9/11 Truth, attacking people that have actually done their research. They do this and they throw up these quote-unquote experts. We've got our own experts, but they throw up their pseudo-experts on these programs. But, they'll put all of this energy into attacking 9/11 Truth, attacking basic science. But then they'll go ahead and they'll play 8 hours of Nostradamus or 8 hours of aliens, and they'll have some guy with troll doll hair on there claiming that because some cave painting shows somebody with a slightly elongated head, well, it has to be an alien. And the reason I'm talking about this is it goes to show that, History Channel is not really any kind of source of information or of accurate information or any kind of authority or voice of reason in this debate. It's just a propaganda tool. And, and that's how it's being used against real science, against real scientific evidence that what we were told destroyed the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 isn't factual. And so, I wanted to point that out at the beginning of the show because, like I said, we've been going after the main, quote-unquote, mainstream media for weeks. But that's a very interesting point. Look at their other programming. They're not talking about real science. They're just talking about silliness.
Absolutely. And then we get into the 9/11 issue, and all of a sudden they care so much about the science and being so factual. Good point, Andy. We talked about last week, Andy. We talked about are we hitting a turning point? Are we or are we not? We talked about a lot of events going on lately. I know we have these spurts going on every year around September, around 9/11 anniversary. A lot of action going on, awareness. We have Ed Asner going on CBS and giving him a dose of truth. We had Jesse Ventura, the governor, going on and taking on Pierre Morgan. All kinds of people out there. Rosie O'Donnell has been speaking truth. People on TV, magazines. We have the Experts Speak Out documentary, breaking ground and just taking on the mainstream media. And they're running right now. But that kind of, my way of summarizing last week's conversation, we talked about all the good things that are happening and how the media is being exposed with regard to 9/11. So let's keep this going. And you're right, Andy. Unbelievable. They'll do 1 minute, they'll claim that they are the science, and we're going to play a clip on that, like as you said. And then the next minute, they're talking about all kinds of other stuff that are not necessarily known to be scientific issues. But they're not afraid to put it out because really, in the end, it's all about their ratings and money and profit and all that. So we all know that. So
and a quick comment on that CBS, that Ed Asner on CBS. What ticks me off? I mean, they'll cover it, but then they try to spin it. And the headline, if you want to look up the Ed Asner clip on CBS, CBS's headline is Ed Asner, he's got spunk and we love it. So they can't attack him, and they can't attack him on basic facts that he's that he's talking about, and also they know if they attack him, he's an older gentleman, they're going to look bad. So what they will do is they'll patronize and be like, "Oh, that wacky Ed Asner is talking about 9/11. He's got spunk, and we love it." And this is the kind of patronizing attitude of the main. I don't even like to say mainstream media. I need to shock myself every time I say that.
The corporate media.
The corporate media, the lie media. All right, so this is just another. I want to point this out because this is just another tactic. They will. If they're going to look bad just viciously going after somebody, or if they can't attack the facts he's saying, they're just going to patronize them and say, "Oh, it's just that wacky Ed Asner talking about 9/11 facts."
Yeah,
to try to dismiss people.
There's that crazy Rosie O'Donnell making sense there. She's letting, Barbara Walters is allowing Rosie O'Donnell to convince her, and she's contaminating her with the truth. Yeah, exactly. That's what they do, these spinning off these issues. Boy, did we expose that. We've been exposing that the last few weeks, and we're going to march forward with more exposing, and we're going to keep bringing on experts one after another. That's right, people. We're going to just keep doing that here on 9/11 Freefall. People want to know what the experts think, and people that were there. And experts, by that we also mean people, first-hand eyewitnesses, people that were right there. We talked about all these other different testimonies in the past of firefighters and all that. So, all right, we're going to keep that going. Briefly, we like to, what else is going on in 9/11 Truth? Just a couple things for everybody. There's, someone put out a fictional presentation, actually. It's called Operation Terror. That is already being banned in theaters here in California, or at least in L.A., and I guess maybe in some other places, already banning a fictional presentation talking about 9/11 Truth and depicting it in a fictional form. We also have some other events. We always remind everyone to go to, 9/11 Journey for Truth, where Rena Patty and Pam Senzi, they are biking their way across the country and sharing the Experts Speak Out documentary with everyone. So that is still going on. People, check it out, 9/11journeyfortruth.org. So just a few little pieces of news, of 9/11 Truth news. All right, well, we'll go forward. What we do every week, and we're going to do that right now, is we're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 before we start and continue with our show. We do this every week to remember the victims, and by victims we mean not just the nearly 3,000 victims that were murdered on that day, but many other victims, many people that are still alive, or people that have subsequently died, also people who have suffered loss and are dealing with this burden of 9/11. So with that said, let's take 10 seconds of silence starting now. All right, and with that, we want to remind our audience that we just simply do this to keep ourselves focused on why we do this show. And it's just a little homage we give, a little respect for the victims and for all of us who have suffered as a result of 9/11. And I take this moment here to disclaim right now, 9/11 Freefall speaks for itself. Andy and I, we speak for ourselves. The opinions expressed on the show do not necessarily express the opinions of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth or any other organization that we talk about and highlight on this show. So, all right, and moving forward, my question of the day, right, Andy? I surprise everybody with a question here. My question is very similar to a question from last week and or the week before. It's simple as this: what should be the punishment for academic fraud across the board? Simple question. No two parts to it or nothing. What should be the punishment for academic fraud? Should there be a punishment, I suppose? Maybe some people think there shouldn't be. I think there should be.
Well, I believe there should be, too, and I think part of the punishment should be the guilt that you feel for covering over the deaths of nearly 3,000 people, what really killed them, and everything that followed, and what has happened to America as a result, what's happened to our foreign policy, how the world has even turned further against us. It should be that guilt if you feel it. I talked about this last week, and I just want to remind everybody, people died. And maybe that should be the new mantra of 9/11 Truth. People died that day. This is serious, okay? Watch Building 7 fall. And I always, whenever I talk to people about this, they always end up admitting that there's something wrong with Building 7, that something happened with Building 7 that needs a new investigation, okay? But it's looked at as kind of some kind of outside thing, kind of like a fanciful... Like it's something that doesn't matter, oh yeah, kind of interesting. But no, people died that day. We need a real investigation to get justice for those people. And I can't stress that enough. So, when you raise this question about what should be the punishment for academic fraud, this is something that has major implications for America and for people who were affected on that day.
Absolutely. I can't argue with that, and very well said. It's just a big, big issue, and I guess we do throw it out there, and it does mean a lot. And hopefully, no one takes this for granted, or just takes it as something that we're just throwing out there for the sake of the show. This is a very serious question of academic fraud. So hopefully, people can reconcile this and just think about that question: what should be the punishment for academic fraud? Okay. With that said, we're going to move on to our guest of the day. Our guest is a doctor, a PhD. He's a Professor Crockett Grabbe. Now, this guy has been around. Professor Crockett Grabbe, he's received his PhD in applied physics from Caltech in 1978. Having received a Bachelor of Science with highest honors and master's degrees in physics from the University of Texas. He is an experienced scientist who does research and consulting in applied physics, as well as writing and speaking on physical science and technology-related issues, including the current events issue of the World Trade Center collapse on 9/11. This is in spite of adversities he has tackled, including he's recovered from a large pituitary tumor and later on a cerebral hemorrhage, receiving several disabilities from both experiences. Despite these traumas, he has overcome several barriers and become a productive and respected scientist, a writer, and a speaker, having published over 100 scientific papers and 8 books, and about 25 other general articles. Mr. Crockett has just moved his business, which is C Lane Research and Consulting. He moved it down to Austin, Texas from Iowa, where he was a research scientist for some 29 plus years at the University of Iowa. And he has consulted and trained with American College Testing and other businesses in Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin. He has spoken at places across the country, from California to New York, in several European countries, and as well as Israel and Canada. He's a member of the National Speakers Association. He's also also a member of American Physical Society, the International Union of Radio Science, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, and the Texas Writers in Contemporary Authors Writers Directory, and he's also the who's who in science and engineering. So there you are. That's a long presentation, and that's because this gentleman has done so much work. Professor Grabbe, thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for greeting me.
Okay, well, again, we do thank you. I know it was a bit of a last-minute invitation. We've had a lot of other individuals that have come on this show and shared some of the work that they have done. You have done a lot of work in the field of 9/11 science. We want to thank you overall for everything you've done, and we're going to talk about this. First of all, I want to say, in addition to thanking you for coming on the show, just before we get into some of your work, and I know you have a lot of things you want to talk about, and I'll let you do the talking. I'll let you just guide us in everything you want to talk about. You want to give us any kind of background in terms of when you got started in this movement, what kind of did it for you, any one topic did it for you?
Well, I'll tell you a little history. I mean, back when 9/11 happened in 2001, I was absolutely glued to the television. What happened? First, it looked very clear that terrorists were bringing planes in to hit the buildings. but then all of a sudden the buildings collapsed, and that I could not understand. How in the world would the buildings collapse? Because planes hit them. And as I was pondering that, I actually was asked that question by a student. How could that happen? So I was thinking about it, and I finally came to the conclusion a few days after 9/11 that they could not. And so I wrote an article. I published it in some editorial in some newspaper, saying that the planes did not cause the towers to fall. There had to be more going on. And I said there were some kind of explosions that brought the towers down. Now really? I put that on my website, sealane.org. I had that on my website. And I waited for the studies to come out. When the studies came out claiming fires did this, I did not believe it. And I was thinking about maybe one of these days I would write a book disputing that. But in fact, I just left that on my website. A little over 5 years later, a reporter from New York called me over the phone. And because of that article on my website that I had written a few days after 9/11, and wanted to interview me, and so I went on and I had an interview on INN World Reports in New York, and I became active as just a result of that. The interview was in April of 2007, so I published 2 articles. I wrote an article with that reporter, and I wrote another article for scientists that I published in one of Steve Jones's publications, the Journal of 911 Studies, and I became involved in a couple other scientific studies subsequently.
That's incredible, so we've interviewed a lot of some of the other scientists. It's amazing that you seem to, right away, your spidey senses, if you want to borrow the Spider-Man analogy, were tingling already. You weren't comfortable with the official story from the beginning then. The way the towers came down, that just didn't make sense to you then?
Yeah, it didn't make sense to me, and certainly I started reading things after I got this call and was interviewed on the radio, and that was one of the I really put some of the thoughts in papers and one on the internet. But it's interesting. This was early 2007. NIST had put out their report on the fall of the towers in 2005, and there were scientific flaws abounding in that 2005 report. As I found as soon as I started reading it, because of the call of that reporter from New York, and so I ended up writing things where I talked about the important, for example, that there was not one mention in the whole report of the conservation of energy and conservation of momentum, and how that's not satisfied in their analysis, and furthermore, they don't even look at what happens for the way the towers fell, because they only bring it up to the time that they start falling, and they conclude, well, that was all they needed to do. That's not a scientific approach. But anyway, and because as a result of my writings, and others had mentioned this, Stephen Jones had mentioned the conservation of energy momentum, and NIST put out an answer to frequently asked questions over their 2005 report. They put it out in December of 2007. And they formulated the questions, and the question was, were the basic principles of conservation of momentum and energy satisfied, and this analysis of the response of the towers to the aircraft. Then they gave an answer on how, yes, the plane satisfied conservation of energy momentum, the planes hitting the towers. And that completely completely ignored the whole discussion. The whole discussion was the conservation of energy and momentum with the towers falling. Now, if you look at the fall, for example, of the South Tower, it starts out with a horizontal ejection of white dust. It's a very high velocity. You can see that oncoming in a very large portion of the tower, and for that to be coming forward like that is a substantial amount of momentum. What produced that? Well, the only thing that can produce that is a force behind it. And what is that force? Well, it clearly could not be the gravitational force, which would be the only force that's available if you have flyers causing something. It had the force was an internal explosion inside the towers, and this was blowing outside the towers at very high velocity. Now, initially you saw the white stream was coming out from the tower, but then you saw this gray dust, these huge amounts of gray dust right above it, coming out of the part of the tower where the fires had been. And then you saw the top of the towers coming down. Well, I said that I basically called this out on this whole thing, pointing out the problems with conservation of energy and momentum for the fall of the towers. And NIST never brought up that subject again. They have never since mentioned conservation of energy and momentum.
Amazing. That is incredible.
Right. It's incredible. But in their 2008 report and so on. But I mean, I have a feeling that my report in early 2008 kind of shut them up. I don't know.
It probably did. No, that's amazing. And that work, I hear what you're saying, and that's one of my questions that I wanted to ask you later, is that with NIST, or whether you're dealing with popular mechanics or anybody else who wants to get their theories from NIST, they seem to always have this fragmented approach. They will try to provide an answer for a phenomenon, but it's they're providing this temporary kind of patching the hole, if you would, to kind of get past that one conversation, but they never bring it all together for you. When somebody provides an answer or an explanation, that explanation has to last forever. You have to be able to continue defending it. You have to maybe even be able to do experiments to prove your theories. Instead, they provide one little patch answer, something that could potentially be possible, but very, very, very improbable, but that suffices, and they'll avoid the topic from that point on. So, but we'll get into that. Well, for our audience, and I know, we try to bring these issues out to our audience. We probably are guessing are not all physicists, and they're not all chemists and architects and engineers. They may not understand all of this. So we're going to go back to that and see if you can simplify things for us, Dr. Grabbe. So what we'll do now, let's play a video for our audience. It's obviously an audio we have two individuals being presented as experts by the History Channel in this video that was put together by the same people. The INN World Report is the YouTube channel. These people have quite a series of videos. So this is part 6 of called the INN Takes on the History Channel. And we're going to listen to, Mathis Levy, an author of a book called Why Buildings Fall Down. And the other comment is going to come from Mr. Jim Miggs, who is an editor at Popular Mechanics. So these guys we're just going to play a little audio from them starting right here. Let's play that, Andy.
If you look at the video and you just see these puffs coming out floor by floor by floor, it's apparent that the floors are being blown out of the way as the building is falling.
As the buildings collapsed, they literally pulverized the materials inside the building. the concrete floors of the building were essentially turned to dust, as were the sheetrock walls. And that's why you saw this light gray-colored dust forming as the buildings collapsed.
A building like that, it's like a giant accordion. It's full of air. When the top of that building comes down, all that air has to come out. And where it comes out the windows. It blows out the windows.
It was just an enormous amount of energy that was being formed by the collapse of the building. And that energy compressed the air and caused the dust to be blown out the side of the building.
And there you go, people. Jim Miggs and Mathis Levy being portrayed as experts by the History Channel, INN, taking them on, exposing these guys. Dr. Grabbe, you heard that clip there. What are your thoughts listening to this stuff?
Well, Miggs is totally wrong. His discussion about the building is like an accordion, and when it falls down, the air blows out the windows, and that's what caused these squibs. It was the air blowing out the window when it came down, when it compressed. But that, in fact, is not the case. Now, I want to point out, if you've seen the book that I put out last year, it's now available on Amazon.com's Kindle. It's an ebook. You can download it for less than $10. The name of it is National Swindle of the World Trade Center.
Okay.
And,
say that one more time for everybody.
National Swindle of the World Trade Center.
National Swindle of the World Trade Center. Okay.
Right. And you could find it online. Amazon. Amazon.com has an ebook. You can download the ebook for under $10 or else. But anyway, the thing about the ebook is I have 7 chapters in there. There are 37 total photographs of exactly what happened in the demise of the World Trade Center. But the Chapter 2 deals with the fall of the South Tower. Chapter 3 deals with the fall of the North Tower, and Chapter 4 deals with the fall of Building 7 of the World Trade Center. Now, in Chapter 3, I want to point out Figure 4 of that chapter. Mm-hmm. Figure 4 shows the North Tower collapsing, and it shows 3 different squibs there. There are 2 squibs that are oncoming, but the one squib is coming out the side, and it's very clear what that form of that squib is. That is not air. That is material, and it's obviously inhomogeneous. It is shooting out close to 100 feet away from the building, and it's all sorts of solid material and pieces of material. But it makes it very clear that what Jim Miggs is saying is not correct. In fact, the squibs like this shot out of all 3 buildings. In the case of the North and South Tower, they shot out periodically about every 10 floors or so.
Absolutely. I agree. And it seems like these guys, if anyone can go and see the video, they can go to your site. They can go get the ebook, Figure 4, and you're talking about all that, and see these materials. This is not air. And we had Professor David Chandler on here a couple of months ago talking about that and how he measured the speeds beyond upwards of 60 miles an hour or more, the ejections being ejected at these high speeds. And that also, so there have been other professionals who have analyze this stuff, and there's just no way that it can be. So what do you make of this stuff? And we have the other character, Mathis Levy, talking about energy being created simply by the fall of this tower. We talked a lot about Newton's laws here, and I know you've done a lot of work to talk about the energy, and you mentioned the conservation of momentum. There are so many holes in this, but what are we to make of this comment of this gentleman, Mathis Levy, who is the author of Why Buildings Fall Down, creating energy out of thin air?
Well, what Mathis Levy is talking about, as well as everybody who buys the claim that fires brought the towers down, the thing that can generate energy is the fall and gravity. It's a gravitational force that creates the energy. But here's the rub. It has to fall slower than free fall. It has to be the friction of the fall in the tower that actually generates the energy. Now, for example,
is there anything else out there that can generate that energy?
Oh yes, of course. There were for fires to have brought down the towers, like NIST claims, that's the only force that is available, and it's basically.
That's my point. There is no other force available. I mean, we're talking about a vertical force to what's pushing that top in there, of course. And we want to remind our audience that in order, and I'm going to interrupt you right now, just to kind of remind our audience right now that what we're talking about is we're analyzing these individuals who are defending the NIST computer model science. And in order to do that, what we've done for a few minutes, and we want to apologize to our audience who understands 9/11 truth, we want to remind everyone, and I'm saying this partially sarcastically, but it's true, that we're actually taking all the hard evidence and we're setting it to the side. All the testimonies, all the witnesses that heard explosions, the firefighters, all the coincidences. We're taking all of that and we're just putting it on the ice right now, just so we can entertain the NIST or the NIST computer model simulation science. So again, you would have to, for us to accept these theories that these individuals, Mathis Levy and Jim Miggs, are talking about, we'd have to sidestep everything, pretend like those testimonies don't exist, and entertain that. So that's what we're doing. So now back to what we're talking about here. He's saying that this energy is being created simply by the gravitational fall of the building. So the upper part of the building, and we've discussed this on this show many times, that the official story in the NIST claims, and by the way, for everyone out there, this is the pile driver theory. And again, that the top block, the theory is that the top portion of the building above where the plane hit went ahead and took out the lower portion, and it was so heavy that it generated its own energy enough to break through the most resistant part, through the path of most resistance, and it broke all the stationary, or I guess they call it the potential energy, and the lower part of the building that was solid and not going anywhere was suddenly not only going somewhere, but according to these guys, the audio that we just played, the lower part is simply being pulverized. It's being allowed. It's just disappearing before your very eyes, just from the weight of this top portion. So that's what we're talking about, people. So anyway, back to you. Now, what can we make of this lunacy? I mean, this idea that the energy is being created right then and there. How is it really as bad as it sounds?
Well, first of all, let me talk about a few things from the fall of the South Tower and also the North Tower, but particularly the South Tower, because the South Tower, the story is that the pile driver explains what happened there, but in fact I claim it doesn't, and I want to deal with several points here. First of all, when you look at the initial FEMA report that was put out back in I think about 2001, in Appendix C of that FEMA report, there was a metallurgical examination by scientists, and that metallurgical examination suggest that there were explosives going on, because the temperatures were reached that were much higher than the fires could produce. And now, if you go and look at the 10 figures I have in Chapter 2 of my book, those 10 figures in showing the fall, there is no evidence of fire anywhere in that South Tower collapse. It does not exist. There was before they start, there's smoke coming out the top. That smoke is all moved just above the thing, but then there's also the sorts of dust starts coming out, and the dust is totally separate from the smoke. The fires, and in fact, for the South Tower, the reason it came down so fast because all the fires had effectively burned out. The firefighters had said they could take care of that before it started to fall. Says, we can take care of this because there's almost all the fires are out. That was overheard on the firefighters right before the collapse occurred.
Right, that's the audio clip. I was going to say, is that the audio clip where the firefighters are discussing that there are just 2 pockets of fires remaining, correct?
Right, that's correct. That's correct.
That's right.
And there's just 2 pockets, and neither of those pockets were very small, and neither of them show up in these collapse figures for the tower. Now I want to come in and discuss 2 other issues with that, because I have responded to articles in the Journal of Engineering Mechanics, first by Keith Seffen. Keith Seffen put out an article, and he went on and made a news report on the BBC, claiming that he knew why that he discovered why the towers actually fell, that nobody else had done that, and he put his article claiming this is why the towers fell. And so I took that article and replied to it and cut him to ribbons, to be honest. And he never replied to my comments. He never replied to them. That came out in April of 2010. I think it was 2010. Could have been 2011. But anyway, I also made a comment replying to an article that Lane and Bazant published around January of last year. And Lane and Bazant, they did reply to me. And so I want to mention 2 things that in fact, that I took them, both Seffen and Bazant out on, is the fact that they modeled everything using one-dimensional models. And the thing about one-dimensional models is fires with the columns, they're very inhomogeneous. There's no way you can model a fire with one dimension. The towers have 287 columns, separate columns on them. And by doing a one-dimensional model that they use, it's like you're modeling all of these 287 different columns as one column, and you're assuming that what happens to that something happens to that one column. In fact, it is not. Fires can cause 1 or 2 columns to collapse, but they cannot even begin to cause that huge number of columns in the towers to collapse. And there is no way one-dimensional models will be adequate. So I criticize both Seffen and Lane Bazant on that. Now, I want to read just a sentence of Bazant's response on why these one-dimensional models, the equations using the one-dimensional models are good. This is in Journal of Engineering Mechanics. He says, Bazant et al. Took them into account, and he's talking about the three-dimensional effects, took them into account through the corresponding energy dissipation terms and the one-dimensional dynamic equations they used. Now, how can you put energy dissipation terms and claim that takes care of the other dimensions in that one dimension? There's no way you can even begin to cover the effect of all those 287 columns through those energy dissipation terms. And that's what he did. What they used to put forth the pile driver theory and everything. Yeah, I wanted to also, because this comment and his Bazan and Lay's reply to it just came out. I just picked up the journals yesterday. It was the October 2012 issue. Now, in discussion of their paper and then what they call the closure to their paper of why I am wrong. Well, anyway, I want to deal with one other issue that was wrong here, and this is the first issue I brought. And this is something that, in fact, I'm not aware of anybody discussing it except me and my paper bringing Lay and Bazan to task. And I say, for example, I was talking about the South Tower, and I was saying how after the stuff comes up out from the sides, then the top starts coming down, but then it comes out at a substantially faster rate than it should be coming down. And I say a measurement of how fast the top segment started coming down yields about 24 meters in the initial 1.0 seconds. Now that's just one sentence in my comment. Now in the reply to it, Lay and Bazan says my claim is supported by no measurement. In other words, they don't believe in my statement that they came down 24 meters in 1 second. And then they say, in contrast, Bazan et al. 2008 analyzed in detail the video record of the collapse and showed the collapse to be for the South Tower, and it says after 2 seconds slower than the collapse, the freefall velocity. Well, the point is, I'm talking about the first 2 seconds. In fact, I say this is true for the first second. Now, people who are not familiar with this, but who have my book, go to the chapter 2, look at figures 5, 6, and 7. 5, 6, and 7. There were 3/4. 5 differs from 6 by 1/2 a second. 6 differs from 7. They collapse after 1/4 of a second. So they cover 3/4 of a second between them. And that 3/4 of a second, the top of the building falls 100 feet. Gravity cannot cause that, period.
Exactly.
Now, the information I gave on the first 1 second, gravity is going to have a force of the force is going to have to be 4 times the force of gravity to cause that top to fall down. And in that second that you could look at in the figures 5, 6, and 7 in that chapter, my chapter 2, they show that the force is greater than twice the force of gravity. And it's there for you to see right in plain English. It goes down 100 feet. And for reference, the width of the towers is 209 feet. It goes down half of the width of the towers in that 3/4 of a second. It is clearly not gravity causing that to fall very quickly. What it is, there was an explosion inside the tower. The explosion is pushing all this gray dust outside the lower part of that top, and it's pulling down the top of the tower at a force much greater than the force of gravity. It's a gradient in the pressure of that's created by the explosion.
And that, absolutely. And for the sake of our audience, we're just talking about claims made by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and this organization, Lay and Bazant, providing is supposed to be a rebuttal to Professor Grabbe's challenges by simply finger pointing one issue and ignoring a couple seconds, and just providing skewed data that fits into what they are saying. And
what would make a correction on that, because this is their reply. I cut down their paper. Basically, this was a discussion I sent in to cut down their paper in Material Engineering Mechanics, and they replied to it by denying what I said. And so I just wanted to make the point that I am making. It's right there in plain day in my figure in chapter 2 of that book that I wrote last year that you can download from the internet, and it shows that the top of that tower has fallen 100 feet, over twice as far as gravity could possibly cause it to fall during that time period. So, anyway.
That's amazing. That's great work. And like I said, we had David Chandler here talking about similar things, and just calculating the energy and the force and watching these videos and just analyzing it. So, but it's amazing how these individuals will continue to simply ignore or just look away. They have so many tactics that they use to get around the reality of what we're looking at. We're talking about the front line of science. And that's what we're trying to do on this show. We're trying to expose the individuals and the organizations that continue to perpetuate this pseudoscience, all based, because anything could happen in a computer model simulation. You can just tell the computer what you want it to do. And for our audience, the audio that we played earlier, while these so-called experts were speaking, those that are watching the History Channel presentation are simultaneously being shown a computer model simulation of the World Trade Center coming down, being pulverized by this top portion. So that's what the audience is watching while they're hearing these so-called experts. And this is what we're dealing with. This is the level of deception that we're dealing with. So, Professor Grabbe, what do we make of all? I mean, I guess you've done an excellent job of exposing these lies and pointing. And I know you've done a lot of work. You want to add to this? Go ahead.
Yes, I want to add something, because David Chandler made a very good point about Building 7, the fall of Building 7. Now, for the listeners, I will point out Building 7 was something that fell several hours after the towers fell. Building 7 was something that was not hit by a plane. The towers were hit by planes, supposedly driven by these tourists. But the Building 7 was something that just fell by itself about 7 or 8 hours later. And David Chandler was talking about how the first 3 seconds of that, he showed by calculation that it was in complete free fall. Now, if you have complete free fall, there is no energy that is produced for that. There is no energy produced for that, so there's no way that can have anything to do with the fall of the building. So then, what caused it to fall? It had to. It went from a stationary state to a free fall state in very short order, less than a second. What caused that to happen? Well, there had to be another source of energy to have caused it to fall, and that source of energy was explosions taken out to lower level. And once it started falling, it fell in free fall because there was no resistance whatsoever in those first 3 seconds. So the thing fell very symmetrically, and it collapsed in about 6.5 seconds. And something falling that distance that it did in free fall would have taken 6 seconds. I mean, it's just so sudden and so clear, and it was clearly a controlled demolition. That was just everything about it was controlled demolition. And the 2008 NIST report that claims that fires in it has about the status of a 19th century report on professional motion machines. That's how scientifically ridiculous it is.
There's no question about that. I'm just blown away by this. Now, I've been following this issue for several years myself. I'm not an engineer or an architect, but I'm just amazed by the violations of the rules of science. You mentioned the laws of conservation of momentum. And I know you've done some work here on the talking about the temperatures that are required in order, or at least you've talked about it in some of your papers. And will you explain? You want to touch on that a little bit for our audience? And obviously, we played testimonies on this show. We've talked about it a lot, where molten steel was seen described by the firefighters. We know there was evidence of molten steel from images from the sky that were shown months later. We know. Tell the audience about the temperature requirements for what we know for sure in terms of ground zero and in terms of the whole molten steel and the requirements of temperatures. What kind of temperatures you need to melt steel and to get that kind of destruction.
By the way, there is also molten steel that's actually seen falling from the towers as it a fraction of a second before it actually starts falling.
Right.
I have in chapter 6. I have one of the figures shows that. But the thing is that the temperatures. There was a paper we put out that was published the first part of 2008 on the extraordinary high temperatures in the towers, and we showed, in fact, that you have temperatures at least 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, if not above, and the extremely high temperatures that cannot be produced by fires. Now, Steve Jones, in one of his papers that he published, I think in about 2005, 2006, shows the picking up wreckage, and the wreckage of very hot steel, and the steel is giving off spectrum. It is so hot that it's giving off spectrum, and you can tell by the spectrum exactly how hot it is. And it's hot. It has heat going up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this is 11 days after 9/11. This is 11 days later, and yet you have something this hot. It could not possibly be produced by fires. Well, what produced these very high temperatures? There was a international group of scientists who found that the very high temperatures could be produced by the nanothermite, and there was a lot of evidence that there were pieces of nanothermite all throughout the towers. There were unexploded pieces, and currently most of it had exploded. Now, what is nanothermite? Well, it's basically a very small, tiny particles mixed of thermite. Thermite is a mixture of iron oxide and aluminum. Right. When iron oxide and aluminum, when it gets up to a temperature above 900 degrees Fahrenheit, an explosive reaction occurs, so that the oxygen of the iron is pulled off and put on the aluminum, and that produces extremely high temperature. It's a very exothermic reaction. Well, it turns out that when you create this nanothermite with these extremely small particles all put together, you can get that temperature at which the reaction occurs down to the lower 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and the reaction will produce melted steel. It'll produce 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That nanothermite, that's what produced the very high temperatures that were observed. That's the only thing that's ever been suggested for having done it. Fires did not do it.
Another big problem for the official story. They're always trying to make jet fuel burn at 3,000 degrees Celsius or more, and it's just not possible. Now, any thoughts on the idea? I know you've mentioned also that there was evidence of evaporated metal on steel, or whatever you want to call it. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I just point out that there was evidence of evaporated steel, and I don't know the specifics on the evidence, but I'll tell you, steel evaporates at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You had to have extremely high temperatures for that to occur, assuming it did occur. But even the melted steel is adequate to show how the towers really came down.
Absolutely, and obviously there was the evidence of the microspheres, the iron microspheres that was also found in the dust.
Yes, and I want to end by making a quoting from two scientists.
Please.
The two scientists, one I mentioned is Dr. Lynn Margulis. She actually died last year. She was a world-renowned scientist, was a distinguished university professor at the University of Massachusetts, and she received the National Medal of Science in 2000. Back in 2007, she wrote in an article about the NIST investigation. Says, I suggest that those of us aware and concerned demand that the glaringly, erroneously official account of 911 be dismissed as fraud, and a new, thorough, and impartial investigation be undertaken.
That she did say that, and I want to remind our audience, she is one of the experts interviewed in the latest documentary by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, the documentary entitled 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out. Professor Lynn Margulis is one of the experts, indeed. Thank you for bringing that up.
And by the way, that interview was before she died, because she died last year.
Right, she did.
At the age of 73, but she made her mark on the world.
Yes, she did. All right.
One of the scientists I want to quote from is John Polanyi. He's a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry in 1986. He said, "Nothing is more irredeemably irrelevant than bad science." Well, the NIST committee has put out 50 reports that I would say, by that token, are irredeemably irrelevant. They contain glaring errors of bad science.
Unbelievable. Well, I want to really thank you for coming on this show, Professor Grabbe. I know there's a lot of information here. You've done a lot of work. We could be here for several shows going over everything, obviously, but we only have so much time. Dr. Crockett Grabbe, people. Check it out. Once again, his website, sealane.org, SEALANE.org. You can go ahead and go to that site and check out all his work. Doctor, thank you very much for coming on 9/11 Freefall. We hope that you continue doing what you're doing, and we do thank you for everything you've done.
Surely.
And there you go, people. And with that, we're going to wrap this show up. And until next week, again, listen to us on 911freefall.com. Check us out also on nolinesradio.org, where you can, on either one of those sites, check out some of our previous shows and listen in. Tell a friend. And, of course, feel free to embed our show anywhere you are, any website, on Facebook, and all your social media. Tell everybody about 911 Freefall. So, again, we're wrapped up for today. Until next week, this is Bernie Suarez right here with Andrew Steele for 9/11 Freefall. Take care, everybody.